What are we here to talk about?
We're here to talk about the Spawn Craw, the crayfish pattern that you can throw in your fly rod.
What is up, everybody? Everyday Angler here. Today I'm here with Adam Kennon. Most of y'all probably know him as Tennessee River Smallmouth and owner of Chattanooga Creek Flies. What are we here to talk about?
We're here to talk about the Spawn Craw, the crayfish pattern that you can throw in your fly rod. Spawn Craw was born out of necessity for me fishing the Tennessee River. I liked all the crayfish patterns out there, but I wanted something with the hook point kind of floating up. Through the years, I have fished crayfish patterns, but have never been satisfied with one that I liked. And so just tinkering around with designs and playing with the different patterns, I kind of came up with this to fish the Tennessee River. And the whole idea was to get the fly down to the bottom and then to make it sort of fish almost like a Ned rig would for like conventional fishing. So the idea was to get it down to the bottom and then to get it to sink, and then also have the hook point floating kind of up like that, like you would on a Ned rig or something like that. And so I played around with designs and different hook positions and weights and trying to put that sort of in different places. But really what helped make this come alive was the shank, the 60-degree spawn fly fish shank. And this is the micro shank here. But really, I wasn't able to come up with this whole design until that shank came out, and that came out last year. So a lot of this pattern is new and came out because of the shank coming out. Some of the things that I kind of R&D'd that were happening with the fly was I positioned the tungsten bead sort of further back on the shank, because I noticed typically people put that tungsten bead further to the front and we'll just finish the fly that way, and that's great. But what ends up happening in that case, and here's one here where the weight is on the bottom, the fly just ends up kind of floating straight up and down like that, and sometimes that will kind of foul on your line. And so the idea with the Spawn Craw was to kind of move that tungsten bead further up the shank so that it had more of a natural defense position for the crayfish. You know, when they're on the bottom and they're kind of defending their hole, they're always swimming backwards, and then the claws are kind of pointing up like that. And so that's kind of what I wanted, and the action that I wanted to see in the fly. So here you can kind of see the positioning of that tungsten bead. Here the bead is all the way to the eye, and you can see that bead's pushed up. And what's going to happen with this fly is it's going to float vertical up and down like that.
Causing it to foul more? Causing
it to foul more, maybe. Some people like that action, you know, that's Ned rig action, up and down, but I kind of wanted it to be in that sort of natural position, and it just seems to fish better for me, for what I needed. And you can see the difference here, that bead is pushed back almost a full bead length there. And so that's kind of the difference in the designs there that really make it swim like a crayfish, is moving that tungsten bead further back onto that shank so that the crayfish lays more like on the bottom, like in a natural position, instead of vertical like that. And the foam and everything on the outside kind of helps do that as well. So like the foam kind of helps kill the fly in a natural way so that it never wants to flip over or go that way. The foam is naturally wanting to stay buoyant and on the top, and so it's always kind of killing the fly through the water. And so it works kind of double in that it's helping kill the fly, and it's helping to keep that hook point up and prevents it from snagging on logs and rocks and those different kinds of things. And so we played with the different sizes here. We have sort of a size 4 that is smaller hook, smaller shank, and the whole profile of the crayfish is a little smaller. And then you can see we have this bigger size 1 hook, I think is what this is, the Eric's Predator hook here. But it's a little bit bigger, and the idea with that for me was to have a smaller crayfish to fish creeks and smaller bodies of water, And then these bigger ones I'm using on the Tennessee River in rockier conditions, in places where I'm really trying to get it to sink. I have a bigger tungsten bead on there, and it's just gonna sink a lot faster than this smaller sort of creek version that I've tied. And so the original versions were these heavier versions here that I came up with just to fish the Tennessee River and to try to catch smallmouth on the bottom. That was the whole idea, was to get down to the fish, get it on the bottom, and then hop it along the bottom just like you would a Ned rig. And so I tied these heavy versions at first, just to get to fish the Tennessee River. And then I sort of moved on to these smaller versions. Once I've kind of nailed down the design here, it was easier to translate to this smaller hook size once I had dialed in the sort of design on the bigger hooks. So once I started doing that, I made even smaller ones, and this is great for like a 6-weight on a floating line. You can throw it at the bank, you can throw it across a shoal, across current, and you can just kind of work it back sort of diagonally across the current. I'll throw mine upstream sometimes and then pull it back downstream. One way that I like to fish a crayfish is just hopping it, just letting it sit on the bottom and then just giving it a good jerk and then just letting it kind of settle back down and then hopping it again. Just 2 hops, 3 hops, and always changing that up. It's always a take that puts the hook into the upper jaw of the fish, which I always like too, because that way you're not foul hooking fish in the throat. And it's almost always a guarantee that that's going to land in the upper lip of that bass or drum or anything. So another thing with the Spawn Craw that I really, keyed in on, especially with smallmouth and fishing crayfish patterns, is crayfish are making noise on the bottom. They're ticking along on the bottom. Fish can hear their feet and their little claws kind of ticking and moving, so fish are always attracted to that in crayfish and that ticking motion, especially smallmouth. So what I wanted to do was incorporate a rattle, and especially a rattle, into the back part, so that when I pulled, it would really sort of make that rattle go. So you can hear that in there. They all have rattles in them. It makes it an easier tie to put the rattle on there. And it gives it a better profile, I feel like. You have that rattle up here. It really makes the profile of the crayfish stand out, and then sort of the tail section's a little smaller like on all crayfish, and it gives it that big sort of fat body profile. So the rattle is kind of dual purpose. It has the rattling effect and it's giving you a bigger profile on the crayfish.
So I know this fly has gained a lot of, it's become really popular. Just if you scroll through Instagram and you're like a bass on the fly guy, you've probably already heard about these. So it's really nice to hear exactly how these came about and why they were designed the way they were. I guess I'm gonna ask Adam, do you have any future plans for Chattanooga Creek flies? Maybe different variations of this or a whole different fly?
Yeah, just fly patterns are always evolving, and so just dialing it in more, making it smaller, making it maybe fishable in other conditions, maybe changing weights and getting it dialed in for different size fly rods, and then just working on maybe a simpler version that is has the same sort of design but is just a single hook version without the articulation, something that's maybe a little more jig style hook. And so really just working on evolving this design and coming up with different weights and patterns and different colors and coming up with different ways to get them in different conditions to fish them.
And I'm going to ask you one more question. How did the name Spawn Craw come about?
Yeah, so first of all, those shanks came out that spawn fly fish out of Washington. I think that's where they are. They put these shanks out, and they're 60-degree jig shanks, and that really sort of made me think, well, Spawn put out these shanks, and so to associate that with the name I thought was a good thing. And so Spawn Craw came basically from spawn fly fish, just because of the product that they're putting out really made the fly come alive, and so I named it that.
And I know a few of them actually have the Spawn football bead on them.
Yep, some of them have the new Spawn football bead. I like that for a different action, for that vertical. Sometimes I'll fish it vertical like that. And so I've been playing around with the different footballs and putting them in different positions. And as Spawn comes out with new products, these flies can change and evolve, and really fish them in different places. We've caught a lot of different species on them. Next, maybe we'll take them to saltwater and see what we can
find. Some redfish action. Maybe a shrimp version or something.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a great time. We've got to get back on the water and finish our float, because we're out here a little later than we thought we were going to be. Adam, why don't you let them know where and when they can purchase these flies from?
Yeah, occasionally I have some available on my website at chatcreekflies.com. And if you want a special order, you can contact me through the website or contact me through Instagram at Tennessee River Smallmouth. Reach out, I can tie you some up if you're interested, or we can start talking about it.
And all of those links are going to be in the description below. So thank you for watching, everybody, and I'll catch you guys next time on another episode of The Everyday Angler.